Hi, hi, hi. Can Wesley, are you watching? Can you tell us if you can hear us? I'm assuming, I'm hoping. Oh, I guess I should keep talking to make sure. On the off chance that we are good and live and all is well. Hi, I'm Erin Meyer. I'm one of 3 board members here tonight for our pre-regular board meeting town hall. We're here to just take questions from the public. I'm going to hand the mic over to board president Brian Jakes. We've also got board member Harry Carroll here with us.
Good evening. I'm told the stream is effective and live and working correctly this evening, so that we have a very small crowd here this evening, so we may be very brief. There's a few things going on in the district that we may talk about, just to give you all some updates on maybe where we are with some things, of course, of the high school and personnel possibly. So we'll see if anybody has any questions about those kind of things before we get started. So just a moment with us.
Have some things I want to pass out, and I brought enough for each of the board members, but I'll bring those back next Tuesday night.
Well, Roger, why don't you come here? Is this microphone?
That mic is, yes, that
Why
mic
don't you
is
come
good.
here so everybody out there can hear what you're saying?
Mr. Blakely, who is a fixture at our school board meetings, has brought some information that he wishes to pass out to us this evening. So just going to talk a little bit. As everyone knows, we are going to be going back to the high school after spring break. We had some community tours that happened last
that's
week.
just for the board.
We
Unless you
had
want it released
a number of
next-
board members
next
that were
time.
present during those tours, as well as administrative staff, central office staff. High school principal, Ms. Jones, was there for those, as well as a couple of her assistant superintendents, and also Kelly Callahan was there, the AD for the district as well. So we were on hand. Comments were pretty receptive that, you know, coming back in the building, people are very encouraged about coming back into the school system and giving some bit of normalcy back to the students for the rest of the year. So that's a very exciting thing. I'd like to be able to give some normalcy back to the students for the last part of the year, to allow the seniors to be able to walk the hallways a few times before they are out of the building. Over the last really 3 years since their freshman year, they haven't had a lot of normal experiences. So be more than happy to give them an experience that's somewhat normal, of being able to actually walk out of the building for a final time instead of leaving from an adjacent or a rented building such as the Martin Center or another area for their last few walks out of the building. We had students that didn't even enter the building for their last day of high school a couple of years ago, and you know, those were things that I remember being, you know, something kind of momentous in my life that I can barely remember. Harry's winking at me because he probably remembers when I walked out of the school building, maybe, so maybe even more than I do.
Yes.
So. Mr. Blakely, do you have something you want to say since you're standing at the mic?
I do. I've brought some material for the board, and I'll bring enough for the rest of the board at next Tuesday night. And what this is the Secretary of the Board report that's filed every year with the Department of Education. And I've gone back to 2001 with this information because that's as far back as it's on the computer. And I thought it might be helpful to the board if you're asked questions about your tax levy, the monies that you spend, what you have in the bank, and things like that. And if you take a look at that top line up there, the 2021, that'll give you the most recent information that's been filed. And it shows that our assessed valuation is $174 million. And if you go back to 2000 and 2001, the assessed valuation at that time was $97,000. So it has increased quite a little bit. And that's the reason that our levy has been able to stay where it's at, or approximately where it's at. There was 1 year of interruption, and that was 2013-14, when the pipeline came through and it raised our assessed evaluation, and the Hancock Act took hold, and it rolled us back to $2.75. And the next year then, it was proposed that we go back to 312 because that's where we had been, and they passed that, and so our levy then was 312, and it stayed there until 2020-21. and then it was raised up to $3.20. The first column is the tax dollars that come from our property tax. Now, there's more money than this that comes from our property tax, and I didn't put it on here because it's the delinquent tax. This is what come in during the year, and anything that came in during the school year, because the fiscal year and the school year is different for the county and for the school district. And so we have 5,486,000 come in, but I've averaged all of the delinquent taxes for the 21 years that we have here on this piece of paper, and it shows the average is about, let's see, $306,000 each year comes in addition to what is levied there as local property tax. And if you proceed on across, it'll show you the beginning balance at the beginning of the school year when the budget was adopted, and then it'll show you the ending balance, the money that was spent and what come in, the difference between the revenue and the expense. And then it shows over on the far right, it shows what the money is that was spent out of the budget. The ending balance is the balance that the board or the school district has at the end of the school year. And this last year, it ended up with $9,040,000. So the only thing I can think of when I was driving out here that I should have done, and it would be helpful to the board, and I'll do that between now and next Tuesday night, is write you a map of how you get to the Secretary of the Board report on the computer. Because when I go through it and try to get on it, they'll come to a point and it'll say something has happened and it just like it's closed down. If you ignore that and just punch the button again, it'll come up with all of the information. But it does have every school district in the state, and you can enter the school district that you want and the year that you want, and then go back to it, and that's the way you get all this information. So I don't know if that'd be helpful to the board or not, but I put it together, and I thought that if you're asked questions, you'll have something that you have handy to take a look at. And that's all I have for tonight. I have no questions or problems that I need to have solved. So I just thought I'd give this to the board, and I'll give the rest of it to the remaining part of the board on Tuesday night. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blakely, for that. So it's always better to have talking points, and I appreciate all the talking points that I can have. So I also just want to clarify one thing. What he said is assessed district valuation. I don't want that to be confused with the school district is valued at this money. This is the valuation of the district that Marshall Public Schools serves. So I just want to make sure people understand that and don't think we've got $174 million worth of property that's assessed within the district, because that might kind of translate out to other people a little bit differently. So, did you have something, Ms. Sarah?
Yes, I
Yes.
have a question about the high school. Do you mind?
Would you come to the mic, please?
Yeah, my daughter's my question relates to the high school. My first question is, are there plans to provide additional supports over the next few years to make up for the gap in lack of instruction based on Edmentum? For instance, an 8th grader taking algebra is having a very different instructional experience than a freshman taking algebra. And then further, is there going to be any flexibility now that they'll be back with their actual assigned teachers? The person who entered their grade for term 3 has not actually seen any of those students since November, except in a few select cases. Is there going to be an opportunity for some blended instruction, blended grading over this last term where the teacher has some discretion based on the relationship and opportunities they've had to work with the student?
I mean, it sounds like so I'm going to answer this from the point of view of a former teacher. This is a question for the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and it's one that we can turn around and ask.
That'd be great.
We've been briefed about a few things, and some of the teachers, some of the principals, I guess I should really say, have come to the board meetings to kind of lay out some of their ideas about that sort of instructional support and kind of closing the gap. But I would rather hand that in the direction of Director of Teaching and Learning.
So we will get with Mr. Jacoby to answer that question a little bit more detailed and maybe get some information between now and Tuesday. That's one of the reasons that we come tonight, is so that we can have better
Right.
answers for you and maybe answer some of those going forward. We have devoted a lot of time, energy, and money into some after-school programs that are going on now. I want to happily say that 2/3 of our district are having normal school. So up till 8th grade, as you were
Right.
saying, school has been pretty normal for these children. They're sitting in classrooms, they're receiving normal instruction, those types of things. This year has been a lot different with Edmentum, the online learning platforms, being in with one teacher or with a couple of different teachers who are not necessarily your main educator, maybe
Right.
for algebra or something, as you're saying, those other subjects. There is some credit recovery that is going to be going on and is currently going on within the high school system that I'm aware of. And yes, we are going to be definitely having to make some efforts to close that gap. That gap is widening for us at the high school in this district, where other districts may be making a little bit of ground or at least
Right.
treading water with it because of the COVID situation over the last couple of years of being in and out of school, blended instructions, as you said, and and remote or more distance type of learning, more just online education type systems. So we definitely need to focus on the high school, though, because of the situation that we've had go on here.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to make sure that we do take some of those efforts to look at those things. One of the things that they do very well within the elementaries is they look at kind of the door scores. They kind of place people back and look for those kind of out times and place people to kind of move forward and with people who are kind of on a like footing. And I think that probably coming back in and looking at placement, looking at where they're going to put people next year, and kind of starting where kids are and starting where kids, not necessarily where we want them to be, but maybe where they really are. And then starting there and then moving back up and maybe recovering some ground and then moving forward at a pace there and making sure that we kind of stay on top of that. But I'll get some better answers and kind of maybe some more concrete examples to be able to give Tuesday night. So.
I kind of wanted to just circle back around to, I kind of want you to ask your questions again, because I want to make sure that I'm really understanding what your concerns are and what's happening, that you're hearing, that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think our experience is that Edmentum has been what you choose to make it. If you choose to dive in and work really hard and try and understand the material, it's a very difficult system, and it can be hard to navigate, especially when the adult that's, I mean, they're proctoring your class, they're not instructing your class, and that they're in a difficult situation. The educators are working hard, I think, but they aren't at liberty to genuinely dig in and help a kid understand a concept. On the other side, you can choose to make Edmentum easier. You can choose to not master the material and still show that you have mastery. It's an online system. I mean, anyone can find a way around that, right? I think especially when you're talking about the math track, because that's one that comes first to mind, if you didn't understand it now, when are we going to understand it? When is there going to be an opportunity for genuine instruction of a concept that you need to build upon, especially as they get into higher level maths? And I'm thrilled that they're going back to the high school, but it's going to be a very distracting environment. I mean, it is not like walking into a completely ready classroom. It's not like happy, jolly, like it's the first day of school and these teachers have everything just so. There's going to be a learning curve there, right? They're going to hear each other over the walls. There's things just in the spaces that aren't ideal. So I just a little concerned about the gap that could potentially be created in that Edmentum experience and the space.
and that's a very genuine concern, and we all feel that concern as well as the educators across the district. As you mentioned, that kind of proctoring theme, you might be with a normal social studies or a science teacher, but they don't necessarily know the concepts, maybe necessarily that, or how to teach you maybe the algebra. They may be able to complete it, but maybe not necessarily instruct it the same way that somebody who teaches that on a normalcy does. So we'll definitely be shooting those questions back, and hopefully as people are able to actually sit within those rooms and move around between those rooms, they're able to grab some more of that kind of in-person, and that
Yeah.
person that they're more familiar with, even if they were familiar with them from last semester,
Yeah.
before Christmas, and to get, kind of some more of that hands-on stuff back in.
Perfect.
I always encourage anyone to reach out to their teachers and always, and students as well, parents and students. I encourage my student to go and reach out, and if my student isn't having success, then I try to reach out with my student and try to help, bridge that gap between him and his teacher to make sure they aren't seeing their teachers in person.
Right.
And so email communication is different for students. I think that some of that's going to advance them ready for maybe some secondary education as
Yeah.
they go out, because they're learning what that's like a little bit kind of on the fly right now. And it's going to hopefully encourage other people to keep on going into school, or it may discourage from other people as they kind of learn that experience and see what they maybe don't want to necessarily have in their after years. But it's a life experience that's different than we could ever intentionally offer a child.
Yes.
As it's going now. So I'm glad to hear that you're excited about us going back to the high school. We understand there's going to be barriers. There's definitely going to be some sound differences there
Yeah.
with the opening of the ceiling without the drop ceiling. There's still pieces that are going to be putting in place, through spring break, and corrections, and tying up the wires even a little bit higher, repositioning some of the lights, those kind of things. Even conversations about maybe about there might be some changes within the restroom structure, just to allow a little bit more privacy, and even Ms. Jones and I talked about maybe possibly even looking at lengthening a little bit of time between bells to allow students a little bit more movement, and to get down to maybe restrooms that were back down towards the commons area if they didn't feel comfortable using some of the other ones that that could be possibly more open to the ceiling, up in the main building. So we're going to be very student conscious as we go back, and try to be listening to those students, and we encourage the students to, speak to their teachers while they're at school, to speak to their administrators, and to allow, kind of that open dialogue to happen there. And of course, parents are able to always reach out, but remember that people are doing a job too. And
Yeah.
the more that you tie them up on the phone or maybe on email, maybe it may be taken away from other direction or other things that they might have been able to give, so just be patient with people, and we're going to try to make sure we can make the best out of the situation that we have. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So Barry, you have anything?
Well, you just said it all. Yeah, well, we have to be aware of the fact that anytime we're doing online education, that it really puts a lot of responsibility on the student. And I've taught online for a long time. And the good students handle it extremely well. And other students, they get frustrated, and it's difficult, so.
All right. So we kind of talked about the high school a little bit, and high school education going on. Our baseball team is currently in Florida now on their annual trip. So that's where Matt, our current vice president of the board, is now with supporting his son on that trip as well. So spring sports kicked off last night a little bit on some other news. The jamboree that was going on, and as well as the sale for the soccer team, seemed to be pretty successful that were going on last night. Us as a board and the district administrators as a whole met with, if you remember a month or so ago, we decided to contract with EGL, company, to help us with our superintendent search, and to look at rounding out our CSIP. For those of you not in school terms, that just means our strategic plan over the next few years, and outlining, taking our goals, taking down those steps, and seeing what we're going to end up with in the future, and where we want to kind of have the vision of the district over the next few years. So we all took steps last night to look at superintendent candidates as well, And we hope that we're going to be able to bring a name forth to you all coming probably by before the time school's going to be out for sure. So we'll definitely move on to that path, and we will get you all acquainted with another person as our district leader. Dr. Mayer is going to be leaving us after a few successful years here. Is that 8 that you're going to be going on? Yes, 8 years. So most of us up here have worked with her for about half the time that she's been here within the district. Aaron and I have, of course, been here for 4 years, and Harry's been here for a long 3, I believe he would probably tell you. So another thing is I want to make sure that you all are encouraged to go out and vote before I hand the mic off to somebody else. We do have board elections coming up. There are 3 current vacant seats, and there are 3 current board members that are going to be running for those seats, which would be Mr. Shepard, Mr. Carroll, Mr. Harper, and then Jack Lenz, who is also running, who is a gentleman of the community that will be going. It appears that elections are going to be April 5th, as usually they're the first week of April, so I believe that is the correct date, and I see a nod or two coming out from the audience. So make sure you go out and express yourself on, who you'd like to support as candidates. And remember, we're here doing a public service. The reason that we're here tonight is because we want to be more visible and try to do that. It's spring break. It is the first real good 70-degree day kind of in a little while, and I don't blame anybody for wanting to be outside versus wanting to sit in here and listen to us drone on possibly about some topics tonight. Enjoy some time with your children. They're out of school, some travel that people are having, and I'm glad that we're able to finally have some good weather and look like we're going to be through some good weather for a nice long period. So there are going to be some changes going on at the high school through the summer, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about those as we get towards our later months of board meetings and other things. So I also want to make it clear we got kind of sidetracked last time we met about talking about bonds, levies, new schools. That was not the intent of the meeting in general. I've talked to a lot of people who were like, well, it seemed like you had a propaganda meeting a little bit about that. Those were the course of the questions as we went around. So
It's super interesting because I think as a board, we all kind of just like disagree, right? Like there are different ways Harry and I might be on one side of things, you guys might be on it, other people might be on a different side of things. So we're very much open to the conversation, right? Like we're open to talking about it. And I think we as a board, we kind of span different perspectives about it. So I didn't know people were calling it a propaganda meeting. That's funny.
Interpretation is truth, and so, or at least personal truth. So, but that was not the intent of the meeting as a whole. But that was the direction that we got onto for a little while, and that is something that we will be talking about, part of our strategic planning process. As we met with Dr. Henson last night, as we are going to be putting out another community survey, and that's because we first put out community input. I believe it was in 2020 when we first put out a community survey, and at that time, there may have been different needs that we identified in the district that maybe as we kind of solidify our plans going forward for the next 5 years, we might have changed focus or see some other things that we might need to focus on. The pandemic has brought to light some other options or other things that we may be able to move forward with. We've acquired quite a bit of technology to make sure that we could close that gap in case we ever went into situations where we had to go remotely again, to make sure all students had those same opportunities to have education, to devices, those kind of things. And I'd like to make sure that we put those to good use. We're going to have them on a repair schedule or a replacement schedule every couple of years, and that's not a cheap burden. But, luckily we were able to have some ESSER money or some funds that came through us, to make some improvements within the district in various areas across the district. Districts across the state have spent that money across the country in various ways. But I feel that we're spending it here for the betterment and the upkeep of the buildings that we have and allowing for some greater space. So.
Yeah, I'll address what you talked about the last meeting. I had no intention, I don't think any of us were talking about the things that we talked about, because we hold these meetings to answer questions. And those were the questions that were asked. And then, of course, immediately I got emails say, what do you want to build a new building for? Fix the ones you got. I answered one of the buildings that we've got is over 100 years old. So, but what the questions are what we're going to answer. And if you ask the question, we'll go there, even if it takes us off into the weeds somewhere.
I keep reminding this is also, I mean, one of the challenges of setting up the town halls like this is that you're only getting a handful of board members at any given time, so by no means are you hearing quote-unquote the will of the board, right? If nothing else, you're hearing opinions. And I've got sympathies in some directions that I don't know if the rest of the board agrees with when it comes to property development. So, like I say, we're having the conversation, and that's why we're here. Now, again, before we, go down in the weeds, right? I want to pause and open up for, have any other questions come to mind? Any other concerns? Anybody else in the audience want to stand up and say anything? I don't think we did have any questions submitted. I used to always sing the Jeopardy theme song in my head when I asked my students, what questions do you have? And I would tell them, I'm going to sing the Jeopardy theme song in my head. You have until I'm done singing this song in my head. You will be uncomfortable. There we go. Hey, see? Hey, you.
My daughter's gonna tell me now.
No, go for it.
The last time, I was at the high school for academic night and did the tour. It was still in pretty uninhabitable shape for students. What progress has been made for Tuesday? That these kids are gonna have classrooms that are still not covered in dirt, that are not still dirty, that are not just full of chairs and random places, that does not at all indicative of a classroom or a learning environment, on top of all the other problems with the no ceilings and those types of things. But that building was in no way, shape, or form ready for students, to put students in a classroom at all.
So I can tell you, surface-wise, that the building is cleaner probably than it has been in a number of years. Every surface in the building, every glass in the chemistry room, every book in the library has been clean, scrubbed, wiped down, and those things. Yes. As far as things that are still boxed up, boxes that you were still seeing in areas, chairs and desks that were still sitting up, those types of things are being replaced within areas. Some of the electric, for those of you that are familiar with the high school, there's of course walls that are movable, that are stationary in place, and then there is a kind of an electric conduit column that has the speaker to it, light switches, those things. So those are being anchored back into the wall. People are going around and tying up any wires that seem to be hanging or lingering down a little bit farther, making sure that where they're tying up the lights a little bit higher. All of those things have to be replaced and dropped back down into the grid whenever the drop ceiling is installed. And that's why they're up into the ceiling, into the area that they're in. If you remember, I believe it was just our last board meeting where we actually took a bid to replace the current fluorescent lights with the LED lights. That is a kind of twofold decision, in my opinion, and I assume by the board, since it passed, looking at taking advantage of the insurance money, where we were able to have roughly about a $15,000 payment from the insurance company when we were changing out the lights towards the price of the new lights, and looking at the energy savings that we'll have over the next year or two that make it kind of a no-brainer for us to change to that. Fluorescent light bulbs are very dated. Moving to LED is very cost efficient. So you are going to be seeing those lights in place for the next 60 days while kids are in there, and those are going to be in the ceiling and wired up high, and as they look. There's a lot of fiber cable that is just kind of up there within the beams and the rafters that is going across there. And that open ceiling look that you have there is going to still, of course, remain until the end of the school year. But as far as dirt and debris, there shouldn't have been anything like that. There's a paint smell, a light paint smell in there, because there hasn't been enough bodies or door and movable air. So we are working to have some of that, and to have those kind of, to have the air quality cleaned a little bit more. After you get 800 students in there for a day, I'm willing to bet that kind of new school or that new smell will wear off very quickly within that building. But those are things that are going to be changed and that you'll see are a lot different. As far as maybe every material being opened up and out, that is something because of the amount of construction that we're going to be doing at the end of the year. And we're asking teachers to kind of look at more of the essential type of things. And, you know, as they look in other departments, I always think of chemistry, for example, because there's a lot of equipment that they will need or he may pull out and need for that kind of area. But in other classrooms, you know, teachers may just be using more of their smart board type systems or other things as they're going forward for the next couple of months while they're working with students. So everything won't be unboxed within the entire building, but there will be some habitable spaces, of course, in the building, and educational spaces within the building. So I've talked a lot with students, you know, about how they felt about it and when they were going around. A lot of students came up after the Meet the Owls on Monday night and walked around, and I particularly wanted to talk to the students about how they felt about coming up to school in that area. Parents are one thing. Believe me, I know you're all taxpayers and you have opinions about it, but you're not going to be sitting in there for 8 hours a day. And so I wanted to hear what the students had to feel about the space. The students are excited that I talked to about coming back into the space, about being in the building, about being able to see their peers from across grade levels, because currently they see their peers that are in one grade level, but high school interacts with 4 grade levels. So the people that are at the Martin Center, I don't see. You know, the people that are at the fairgrounds, I don't see them as much. You know, so that was a lot of comments I got from the students about they're excited to be back in kind of the blended classes where they're going to be in classes with other people other than just their grades and be able to walk and socialize within the hallways again. So.
Yeah, I've been through the high school maybe 4 or 5 times, maybe even 6. And I'm not ashamed to admit the first 2 times I went through that building, I literally cried. And the last time I went through that building, I was optimistic for the first time. It was clean. There were problems, and Brian addressed them, so I won't go through them again. But as I looked through, and I went to my old classroom and walked in there, and I could see, as a teacher, it's going to take me a day or 2. I don't know how long. It takes some teachers. Some will take a little longer to get everything back up. But I would have been ready to go right back into that classroom right now the way it was and be able to, I think, work efficiently, because it was one of the few times that I was really optimistic about what I was seeing. It is clean. More importantly, it is safe. More importantly, the kids will be in an academic situation which will be beneficial to them and to the teachers. I mean, our teachers have gone through a lot too with this. Now, they've got a lot of hard work to get it set up, and I don't know if they'll ever get it back to normal again, but you know, it's ready. From a teacher's point of view, when I looked at it, it was ready. And kids can usually do a lot better than adults on almost everything.
I don't know about the specifics with regard to our insurance company. And so this may be something that I hand off, but I can't imagine that the people who are doing the work to prep the high school are going to be let off the hook by our insurance company if it is not appropriate for students to be in there by the time we get started with that. What I don't know is, because I'm not micromanaging at that level of making sure that the insurance agents are doing what they're supposed to be doing and whatever. What I don't know is who gives like the final sign off that this is in good, safe shape, like that the companies that have been contracted to fulfill this have in fact done what they have been said to do. And I have a feeling you would know a little bit more about that background.
So I am somewhat micromanaging a little bit, but as the board president, that's somewhere where I do sign the contracts. I do sit in on those meetings, of course, with Dr. Mayer and the central office staff, as well as with the main gentleman from music, Phil, who is our main contact, as well as the under contractor, Jeremy. Yes, music is the insurance company, for those of you all. So, Yes, we demanded to have a couple air quality tests because I wanted to make sure that air quality was efficient for our students and we were back in a safe range. Those all came back very well for us. We had some surface tests that were done as well to make sure the soot damage and other things that were not present within the building anymore. If you notice the ceiling, if you look up high enough while you're in there, you'll notice the ceiling is kind of sprayed white all over. That is because they've resealed the ceiling as they've gone through there. There's technical terms for it. Please don't butcher me for not knowing the technical terms. That is not my day job. But it has been redone, and all the ductwork has been cleaned, scrubbed, re-wrapped on the outside. You will see at the art room that there's actually a sheetrock wall up there because there is not we took out all the portable walls, so that is going to be a sheetrock wall, and that room is going to still need some construction time within that area, and so that won't be an open area when students come back to school. So we're going to have to adjust a little bit within those spaces. Yes, yes. So, so there have been numerous people who have done walkthroughs and safety checks to make sure that the environment is habitable, for lack of a better term. Before ServPro pulled out, of course, they had to be signed off by the insurance company that they had done all of their job aspects as well. And of course, the air quality tests were something that we wanted to have for peace of mind as people ask, well, how do you know it's safe? We know it's safe because we've done everything that we possibly could to make sure that the environment was safe for students to come back into. So there have been people in and out of that area of the building. I have probably been in that area of the building probably 10 times in the last 2 weeks. So I can tell you that, you know, I've walked those halls. I've been in probably 80% of the classrooms. I've been in every single one of the bathrooms. I've been on top of things in the bathroom that people should never be on top of, probably. So, but you know, I've tried to do my due diligence to, you know, check things that are maybe outside of my scope, but where I would ask questions as a person who was getting contracted work done on my home or area, you know, to make sure, because this is our students' home. You know, it's the home of the owls that we have, our oldest owls in the district. So it is a place to come.
And I think too, it's important for us as a board, for our administrators, for the people who are in charge of this area, to realize that members of the public are going to come in, especially people like me. You know, like I'm an alumna. I know what the high school looks like, right? I've got my mental picture of it in my head. And when you see it now, it is very different. And it's heartbreaking. It is hard to see it scarred up as it is. A lot of progress has been made. The fact that we can even have students back in for any amount of time before the end of the year is remarkable, given the amount of damage and the kind of hazard that that students would have been in had they been in right after the fire. So there are going to be concerns. It will be shocking to people, and that transition back into that environment is a concern, right? People I've talked to about it have been saying, you know, how do we make sure that the mental health of our students is, you know, also in consideration? And I know that conversation has been going on at that building level and above as well. I'm looking at Dr. Mayer here because I've heard her talk about it. But it's important for us to remember that, you know, we've got the technical side where we can say the insurance company is signing off on these things. Our principal has a plan for making sure that the building runs well. Our administrators who are in charge of facilities have a plan. There's levels of accountability here. There's levels of planning. We're going to let them do their job. And we're also asking for a little bit of, you know, we're all in this together. It hurts us to see the high school like this. It's going to be a difficult transition for everybody who's going back into it as well. Hopefully we can come together on the same page and see the progress for what's been made and be excited about coming back into that environment together. If there are concerns as students come back in, please bring them to the attention of the principal first. That's the building level. And that's where concerns need to be addressed first, at the building level. As your students go back in, if they have concerns about bathrooms, about facilities there, the principal's the first point of contact. And if the situation doesn't get resolved to your satisfaction, bump it up. The superintendent is a phone call away, and then so are we.
The last thing, I don't want to say that I'm the only person that's been walking around in the building. The central office administrators have been in there. The administration of the high school have been in there. Other concerned teachers. The other night when I was there before the jazz band concert and people came in, there were some other administrators that had been in the district past. Other teachers had been in the district past. And they walked in and, oh my gosh, it looks different. And then I heard, well, this doesn't look as bad as I thought it would be. I can see school happening here, so, even, there's a level of understanding, with us as adults, and hopefully our students have that level of understanding, as, Harry said, and kind of people say kids are a lot more resilient than adults. The things that we see as barriers, they see as tomorrow or just another day, sometimes, so. Yes, so just make sure that, you're supportive of your students, and we'll be supportive of your students too as they come back in, so.
We don't want to see problems in that building either, right? So, if we're back in it and all of a sudden it turns out, well, we don't want there to be problems either.
No, I was just looking to see if you had any.
All right, I was actually texting to make sure that we look like we're kind of winding down, so I wanted to make sure the stream could be shut off as we were kind of ending up, so I didn't want anyone to think at home that I was that attentive or that bored here while we were talking, but it was for a professional nature as well. So I think that we're going to be probably done for the evening, it looks like, tonight. And we welcome you all to come back later on, and we'll have some follow-up conversations to have. And I'm looking around, and I don't see anybody else that necessarily wants to come up here. I'm not going to give you the Jeopardy theme song necessarily. But I look nothing like Alex Trebek, so I will keep on moving. But we thank you all. If you don't want to hear Brian talk, come next month, because Brian's going to take a month off. Matt has guaranteed me that he will probably be here next month, so I will be more than happy to move around. Harry has been here for the last couple of times, and we thank Aaron for coming tonight and giving us some new blood, another perspective as well. So as she said, these are just conversations. This is not board totality. This is not a vote, but this is just a conversation piece. So I'm going to let Harry finish this up.
Don't know if I'll finish it up because you probably want the microphone back. But reason we only had two coming tonight, and I came to be the third. And I told Brian when I did this, I want people to know that we are here to listen, and that's why I'm make an effort to be here, make sure we have 3 board members. Brian didn't cover this, he covered it in the last meeting. We've got 3 board members here, that way it's not an official meeting. So we're going to try to have 3 board members at each of these when we call them the town hall or whatever they are, so they can be here. Mr. Jakes, if you're away, I'm going to close it up, or you can say goodbye.
I'm going to sit here and say, I'm just going to wait. Are there any other questions, conversations, issues?
That's not
Thanks very much, everyone. Till next.